At Arizona State University, we're bringing world-class education from our globally acclaimed faculty to you. Ranked #1 in innovation for 10 consecutive years and #2 among public universities for employability, ASU isn't just ahead of the curve, it's creating new paths to success. Earn your degree from the nation's most innovative university. Online, that's a degree better. Explore more than 300 undergraduate, graduate, and certificate programs at asuonline.asu.edu.
Owning a boat comes with a number of perks, like being able to say, ahoy, or land ho, and not feel weird about it. So here's another perk. Geico's boat insurance offers access to the largest towing fleet on the water. And with specialist support from agents that are as passionate about boating as you are, there's so much value that you'll want to say, shiver me timbers, and not feel weird about that either. Get more with Geico.
This is Wheelbearings. I'm Dan Roth. Welcome to the second episode. We made it to 2.
We're on a roll.
Yeah. And I'm sorry, I stepped on your intro.
Oh, that's all right. And I'm Sam Abul Salmon.
And so we got a little bit to talk about this episode. We got 2 extremes of modern technology. We got the Hyundai Ioniq and rumors of hybrid Ferraris. Wanted to talk about the possible revival of Cord. And
maybe touch on peak auto industry as well.
Yeah. And so let's get to it.
All right, let's do it. So what are you driving this week, Dan?
This week in the garage, I've got a Volvo XC60 T6 all-wheel drive. And it's a very interesting contrast between that and last week I had the Mitsubishi Outlander. And so driving these two back to back made me think about honesty in a car. Like I'm not sure what that means anymore, really. Like, what does that mean to you?
To me, I guess it would mean, that you look at a car and it gives you a certain impression of what it intends to be, and then when you drive it, there's no pretense about it. It drives the way you would expect from looking at it. So, to me, I would look at an XC60 and I would think, okay, this is a Volvo. It should be fairly solid and sturdy. Not nothing wild. No crazy performance or anything like that. Probably no serious off-road capability. But it should be reasonably reliable and safe and, kind of fuel efficient. I mean, is that the way it is?
Well, so my experience with Volvos has been the reliability is not there.
Okay. Well, I guess you would know as someone who's owned them. So
neither is the fuel efficiency. Okay. Although this one's actually pretty good. And actually, because it's the T6, this has the 2-liter 4-cylinder that's both turbocharged and supercharged. It's got plenty of power.
Oh, so is that the same engine that's in the XC90 as well?
Yes.
300 or 315, I think.
Yeah, 302 and then 295 pound-feet of torque. So it's very, very sprightly. It moves right along. It's very well matched in the XC60. Even better than the XC90. It has, a little smaller vehicle to haul around. But stepping out of the Outlander into the Volvo, like I was just struck, and I've said certain uncharitable things about the Outlander. It does feel a little cheap and that kind of thing. But it's also, I guess I appreciate its vehicular honesty in that sense. It's just like, what you've got, what you're getting, what it's doing. It's not one of those cars that has so much technology that it fights you, like some of the Infinities where, they'll actually try to change lanes back to where you were, like if you forget to signal or something, or you drift a little bit. And like all of that stuff isn't really there in the Outlander, so it doesn't get in the way of driving. So that's a car you can actually just drive. Its ergonomics are pretty simple, and it still has some features. The Volvo seems like there's a little bit more of a layer of artifice between you and the act of driving. And some of it's good. It has adaptive cruise control. It has all of the fancy, driver aids that help you from hitting stuff. And it has, decent controls. It's okay in terms of ride and handling trade-off. It does pretty well, but it just feels insulated. And I guess I'm more and more, I'm missing just an honest driving experience that makes you and lets you focus on just driving instead of like the infotainment system. And although the Mitsubishi didn't have a very good infotainment system, so that was a little bit of a distraction. But I don't know. So I'm going back and forth, and like I'm not sure I'm expressing myself all that well. Am I being clear?
Somewhat. I definitely appreciate, an honest car. And, I think probably the single most honest car I've driven in recent times was the Alpha 4C Spider that I had about a month and a half ago. That's about as honest a car as you're going to find in modern times. There's no driver assist systems. It's small, it's fast. There's no real amenities to speak of. It's just a pure sports car, with nothing else layered on top of it. That I guess that would be the epitome of automotive honesty. I haven't driven the XC60 yet, so I can't comment directly on that. Although I've experienced that engine in the XC90, and it seems like it should be a reasonably true to what you expect a Volvo to be, I guess.
Yeah, it definitely does that. Like your description of Volvo was pretty spot on in terms of like, yeah, it's certainly solid. It's got big wide sills that you step across for good side impact. Structure, it's solid. It's very comfortable. They have some challenges still with their ergonomics and their user interface for the Sensus system. This doesn't have the big dash-mounted iPad-like screen that the XC90 has. This has a system that's it's a little older. It's more like what you'll find in the S60. It's still, because it has a limited feature set, it's okay to use. Some of the stuff was a little bit head-scratching. Like I could not turn off the Volvo calls it automatic active bending lights. The headlights that turn.
The lights that turn into a curve as you're in the wheel.
Right. And so to me, like, that's a distraction. That is like the car being obvious about like, hey, I'm being really helpful and I can see the beams move, and I tried to shut it off and leave the automatic high beams on. And you can't. It's like all or nothing.
Is it that the beams are moving farther than you expect them to, or you just don't like the beams moving at all?
Well, I think part of it is I'm the type of person that just doesn't like automated machinery. I don't like stuff doing things for me.
Okay.
And which is weird because, there are certain things that I'll set up like in my job as like a, audio mixer. I certainly set up like compressors with side chains, and like to get real technical, like it's basically I set up automated processing. So look at this signal and do this thing.
There. I mean, those are things that you're specifically setting up for your needs, your workflow for what you need to do to, for things that you're going to do, for repetitive tasks, so you don't have to set it up every time. It makes sense to do something like that. You're using technology as a tool, whereas when you're driving, that's kind of something different. Especially if it's, if it's not consistent behavior. And I think that's one of the problems with a lot of the technology that we experience in cars is kind of the lack of consistency. It's not necessarily doing what you expect it to do at any given point in time. Back in my engineering days, that was one of the things that we always tried to aim for, developing stability control or slip control systems, is that under any given circumstance, it should be absolutely, the system should be totally predictable. It should never surprise the driver when you're on the road.
And so, I guess that's also part of it is I don't trust it. I don't like seating control to something that, and I know that it's my hang up to a large degree. And at a certain point, the technology is going to be good enough. It's already really good enough that it can outperform me most of the time. Especially in ideal conditions. The only place I really have an edge is actually, in those conditions where there's too many variables to manage the chaos.
Right.
But I still like, and there is a hole in the beam pattern.
You can manage multiple variables in chaos better than a computer can.
Yeah, well, until we program computers to adapt and handle it. Like, we'll get there, and maybe I'll accept it. I don't like it at this point.
Let me ask you this. I mean, we tend to drive cars for a week at a time, and we jump from one brand of car to something completely different, and then the next week we get into something else entirely different. If you actually lived with this thing, for a few months, or even a few weeks, do you think it's something that you would get accustomed to? I mean, is it, or would it just keep being an annoyance to you forever?
Well, I mean, so like stuff like the active bending lights, I would shut them off and they would stay off. So I'd never use it. So that's a feature I wouldn't pay for. It would have to be bundled. It's probably one of those things that comes in the package that this has. So it has the Platinum package, which I think has some of that extra stuff. But some of the stuff I do use, like in our Grand Cherokee, I like the automatic headlights. They're pretty good most of the time. There are times where I have to override it because it's just like it's in conditions where it's around a bend. It can't detect another oncoming car, and I know that and I can anticipate. A lot of the like lane change stuff, my feeling is that like that makes you a lazy driver. It makes you rely on the technology. And even today, I was using the adaptive cruise control in stop and go traffic in the Volvo because it's pretty good in that situation. And it's fine tuned, so it'll follow the car in front of you. It's not too rough on the brakes. And it's the thing that was confusing it was there was a driver in front of me that was kind of halfway out of the lane. I'm not quite sure what was going on, but that confused the system where the sensor didn't detect them.
Right.
If
the radar's got a narrow field of view, then if the car in front of you moves over a bit too far, it might fall out of its field of view, and then it thinks there's nothing there.
Right. And so that's exactly what happened. And so I saw it because I was paying attention and just stepped on the brake, but I thought that was curious. Like, it can't detect. And the backup there is that it does also have the forward collision system that would have stopped itself at a certain point. I just didn't want to test it.
Right.
As a family crossover, luxury crossover, the XC60 is pretty good. It's very comfortable. It's well thought out. The ergonomics are generally good. They're Volvo good. It's pretty. If you like the way they look, it's definitely conservative on the outside. The interior is nice. It's marginally, I think, on the, I guess, size-wise, it's probably right in the middle of its class. So you're paying a premium for something, you're gonna get some more luxury, you're gonna miss out on some of the size, I think. And that's sort of where I'm at. I'm not sure that I would spend $52,000 on it, like its sticker says, just because I feel like it's not necessarily the roomiest choice. And when you're buying a vehicle like this, the passenger space actually plays a pretty big role. But it's really hard to argue with the safety. I mean, the XC90, Volvo's first SUV, they designed that way back in the late 90s, early 2000s. That thing passed the small overlap test. It was one of the few vehicles that passed it without any changes. So it makes me a pretty...
that was an old vehicle by the time they started doing those tests.
Yeah, so I've been a long-time believer in Volvo's safety chops, and that kind of stuff would still... I would consider this if I was in the market and I had the kind of dough that it would take to buy.
Okay. Fair enough.
So what have you been driving?
So the Pacifica went back to whence it came, and I've now got the Hyundai Elantra Eco, which is the newest variant of the Elantra. Got launched a few months back. The current generation Elantra debuted about a year ago, and earlier this year I drove the limited version, which was really impressive. That one had a 2-liter 4-cylinder engine and had all the goodies in there, including all of the driver assist stuff, the lane keeping system and adaptive cruise control and everything. This one, on the other hand, is the Eco, and it has none of that stuff. It's actually pretty basic. It's got Hyundai's new 1.4 liter turbo with I think about 128 horsepower roughly. It's designed to be their fuel economy leader for now in the Elantra size in their compact cars, and because it's a direct injected turbo, it's actually got quite a bit of low end torque, and despite its size, it doesn't have a lot of power, but it does have plenty of torque. So it's got good drivability, good all around drivability, and they pair it up with their own in-house designed and built 7-speed dual clutch transmission, which when I first drove that one last year in the Sonata Eco, that's probably the best mainstream dual clutch transmission I've tried from any manufacturer. I mean, the shifts are really smooth, seamless. Sometimes after a cold start, when it's been sitting overnight, just for like the first minute or so, for some reason it seems to get just a little bit of hesitation, on a launch, on the first launch or two. But after that, as soon as it warms up, it's fine. And so far I've been driving it mostly around town and getting about 33 miles per gallon with the thing. Going to an event tomorrow where I'll have a bit of a highway drive, and it should easily get up to over 40 miles per gallon on the highway. So the thing about the Eco, as I said, it doesn't have any of the amenities in it. Basically, it's got heated seats, and it's got a 6-inch touchscreen radio, and they all the new Hyundais and Kias now have support for Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, so that's good. But
sounds like a nice, honest vehicle.
Yeah, it is. It's very honest, And the thing about the Eco is, it's actually, amazingly enough, for a brand new car, it rides on 15-inch alloy wheels. When I first saw it, I was like, wow, those wheels look kind of small, but and it wasn't. It doesn't seem like it was that long ago that a 15-inch wheel was actually kind of big for a car of this size and this type. But
yeah.
These days, when you got cars running around in 18s, 19s, and 20s. A 15-inch wheel just seems puny. And I guess the one downside, the Elantra in general, when I drove the Limited before, it has quite good, surprisingly good driving dynamics. But this one, just because of the tires that are on it, they kind of feel a little bit squirmy. They don't have quite as much grip and responsiveness. That's kind of what you give up, to get the lower rolling resistance and better, a little bit, a couple extra miles per gallon of fuel economy. But this one is priced at, I think it was like 21.6 or something like that.
Yeah, I was gonna say it starts right at 20.
Yeah, it's this one was under $22,000 including delivery.
That's I guess my question is, because I haven't driven the Eco, but I've driven the Elantra Limited, and I thought that was a very good car.
Oh,
and
yeah.
Hyundai's been learning really fast and really improving their product. Is it still with all that like near luxury stuff out of it? Is it still a very good car at its core?
It's still a very good car at its core. The interior, it's got cloth seats, which are very nicely done. It looks really durable. But it feels a little more Spartan than the Limited, obviously. And some of the surfaces, that were soft touch surfaces in the Limited are harder plastics in this one. It still looks good. When you look at it, it doesn't, as I said, it looks a little Spartan, but not cheap.
Yeah.
And until you actually touch some of the surfaces, you don't even really realize that they're harder plastics. But they're also surfaces that you typically don't touch very often, like the top of the instrument cluster and things like that. So it's definitely something I could live with if I had to, if I was looking for something with maximize the mileage in this kind of size class.
Yeah, it's interesting. We've got a lot of these cars now that are more car than you need, and we're still not buying them. Like this segment does okay, but really, everybody's making this rush to crossovers. And how does it stack up with other offerings like the Cruise Eco and the higher economy version of the Focus? And where does the Elantra Eco
in a lot of ways, like compared to the Focus, for example, some aspects of this I actually like better, in the interior compared to the Focus, just because it's a little bit cleaner, it seems less cluttered. And,
Yeah.
I mean, a bit of the Focus, is almost a little bit over designed in its cabin. In some respects, and
Yeah, I'll agree with that.
I do like the way this thing is laid out. The controls are all exactly where you expect them to be. You've got a rotary volume knob, rotary knobs for the climate controls, and just a bunch of just a couple of rows of pretty straightforward buttons for to switch it between ventilation and the automatic climate control and window defrosters and things like that. So it's a good, honest car, and it does what it's supposed to do. So
yeah, I think that's one of the things that I actually really appreciated about Hyundai over the last few years. Hyundai and Kia, their ergonomics are really well studied. Their cars are easy to operate. Even their infotainment systems are pretty good, and they don't get nearly as much praise for that as I feel like they should, because that's really important.
Yeah.
And
I think personally, still probably my favorite, compact car, especially the interior and the cabin, is still got to be the Mazda 3.
Yeah.
The current generation Mazda 3 is just a fabulous car, and it like the Elantra, it's not it's not cluttered. It doesn't have a whole lot of fancy stuff, but it's just really well executed, and excellent fit and finish and materials. And the fit and finish in this Elantra is great. It's just the materials. It doesn't look like something you would expect in, say, a $30,000 car, but then it doesn't cost $30,000 either.
Right.
Compared to an equivalent. Compared to an Elantra of 10 years ago. It's miles ahead of that.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
So
I mean, the Elantra of 10 years ago is more like that Mitsubishi I was driving.
Yeah, no, I mean, you're right. I mean, Hyundai and Kia have both made phenomenal progress over the last 10 years. And I mean, it's a good, stylish car. It's not, the design, the current generation of Hyundais have kind of toned it down a little bit from the previous generation. But they're still really good looking, and the packaging is excellent, in terms of huge trunk space and surprisingly roomy back seat, for a compact car. So I think there's also they've also got the Elantra GT hatchback, 5-door hatchback, coming shortly. They were just doing some media drives with it a few weeks ago, and that should be hitting dealers pretty soon. So. Personally, in a compact car, I prefer a hatchback, having the ability to, fold down the back seat and, throw bigger stuff in there when I need to, over a sedan. But either way, it's really a good car.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, this is a great pivot to our news topics.
Yeah.
Because if you want an efficient hatchback from Hyundai, you can get the Ioniq, right?
That's right. You get multiple choices. So Hyundai is about to launch. They've already launched it in South Korea, and they're about to launch here their first vehicle platform that's dedicated as an electrified vehicle. So what they have is their new model is called the Ioniq, which when you see it, it's like, that looks kind of like a Prius, except better looking. It's very much, very similar shape to the Prius, that the Prius has had for the last couple of generations, 5-door, fastback, hatchback. And
yeah, I mean, it's really hard to do anything different if aerodynamic optimization is your thing. There it is.
That's exactly it. I was at a media briefing this morning at the Hyundai Tech Center here just outside of Ann Arbor, and Dr. BK the director of powertrain development for their electrified vehicles, was speaking, and he talked about the shape. He said, that if you're trying to get maximum optimum aerodynamics, based on that constraint, there's inherently going to be a certain shape that the car is going to take, and this one takes that shape, just like the Honda Insight did a few years back, and Priuses have done for the last decade. You've got the same kind of shape. The detailing on this, is very much in keeping with, current Hyundai design themes. So it's a good looking car.
It is. It doesn't look anywhere near as weird as the Prius.
Yeah, and especially the current generation Prius. It's definitely not nothing outlandish about the design.
Although and you didn't get to drive this, but the current gen Prius drives really, really well. Surprisingly great.
I have driven the Prius. And you're right. I mean, Toyota made huge leaps in terms of driving dynamics on the new Prius. Still looks kind of weird.
Yes.
And the Ioniq drives are going to be happening shortly after the first of the year, I think. But what's really interesting about the Ioniq is under the skin. So this is a car that's almost exactly the same size as the Elantra, and for that matter, same size as the Prius. I mean, all of its dimensions are within an inch or two of the Prius. Same wheelbase, 106.3 inches as the Prius. What they did with the platform, it's not actually a shared platform with the Elantra, even though it's the same size, because what they've done is they've optimized this one for electrification. And the Ioniq is eventually going to be available by next summer. By the end of next summer, it'll be available with 3 different powertrains: a regular hybrid electric, just like a Prius, a plug-in hybrid, and a full battery electric version. And actually, the battery electric is going to be the first one to launch. It's going to be out. It's going to be on sale before the end of the year, and it's got a 28 kilowatt hour lithium ion battery, and it's going to be rated at 124 miles of range, which compared to a Chevy Bolt, is only a little more than half of what the Bolt is capable of. But it's definitely better than any of the first generation battery electrics that have been out since about 2010. And Hyundai has already said that they're already working on a larger battery version that will debut in 2018 with a range of more than 200 miles.
Yeah, well, and I think that there's a lot of hype, or a lot of sort of false nervousness about that 120 something mile range or 110 mile range that they've got in their press release. Like, that's, even for me with a very long commute, like I could do a round trip commute every day with a 110 mile range. Now, I'm sure that it drops significantly in colder weather. So
and that's the key. I mean, that's where the 200 mile threshold is kind of the key. Is when you get into cold weather states like Massachusetts or Michigan, and your range drops by half in the wintertime. Even in worst case conditions with a car like the Bolt, where you've got 238 mile nominal range under ideal conditions, even when it's 20 below zero, you're still going to have a good 130, 140 miles of range. And now at that point, if you've got a 40 mile commute, you can still confidently make it, to work and back without it. And, maybe, stop at the grocery store or stop to pick up the kids on the way home.
Right.
Without really thinking about it, without worrying, trying to make sure that you can stop somewhere and get a charge during the day. So it really kind of, for, everything but long distance drives, kind of gets rid of the range anxiety problem.
Yeah. And, the whole idea of like, I need a car to take me, if I want to drive across the country, I want to, one car to do it all. Like, I get the sentiment, but really, like, economically, like, if you need to do that kind of drive and you want to commit to an electric car for your daily driving chores, then just rent something.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with that. So what's interesting though about the battery version of the Ioniq, they've done a lot of things to really optimize the efficiency, the energy efficiency of the thing. So it's actually rated at 136 miles per gallon equivalent, which is the best of any electric car so far, by a pretty good margin. And they've done things like they use a heat pump for the climate control system, which uses a lot less energy than the resistance heaters that most EVs have. I think one of the only other EVs that has a heat pump system is the Volkswagen e-Golf. So
is it a straight heat pump, or does it have like an electric element in it for like when it gets real cold? Like, because that's the issue with heat pumps, is they've been decent until the temperatures get real extreme, and then they They just, it's an air conditioner that worked backwards. And,
Yeah,
it's,
they didn't get into too much detail on that. They did say, they did say that they've tested it at -20, -30, and had no problems with it. So
yeah, that's just me being an HVAC geek. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Carry on.
So, but the key to heat pumps, when I tested the e-Golf last year, I tried it with the heat pump. I actually had it in the springtime, but what I did was I took it around my usual driving loop, and I cranked up. I put the windows down and then cranked up the heat to maximum. Even though it was 70 degrees out, and drove it around around a 20-mile loop, and then measured the energy consumption, and it only increased the energy consumption by about less than 15%. It's between 10 and 15%, which compared to a typical EV with a resistance heating system, that would be 30 to 40% increase in energy consumption.
A resistance heater just consumes so much current. That's impressive. The other details of it seem pretty impressive too, like down to the way they've reduced friction with the lubricants and stuff. Like it seems like a pretty holistic program they set off on to make the Ioniq, no matter what version you get.
Right, and
pretty efficient.
Yeah, so the battery electric launches in December, and they're going to focus all their marketing on California and the other zero emissions vehicle mandate states that are following the California emission rules. But it'll actually be available. You'll be able to buy it from any Hyundai dealer nationwide. They probably, most dealers outside of California and those other states probably won't have any in stock, so you may have to wait a couple of weeks to get it.
Yeah, that's smart for them. You fish where the fish are.
Right. And then early in the new year, they're going to launch the hybrid version, the non-plug-in hybrid version, and that one has been officially rated at 58 miles per gallon, which is 2 miles per gallon better than the Prius Eco, and 6 miles per gallon better than the base Prius, the standard Prius, which is rated at 52 combined. And
right, and that's higher than any other car, like any other hybrid.
Right, and
vehicle.
Important thing to keep in mind is that all of these Ioniq ratings are like other cars that have been coming out in the last 9 months or so. They're based on new test procedures that the EPA imposed this year that are more stringent and designed to. They're still doing the same drive cycles, but the actual procedures and processes they use for the testing are a little bit different to try and make the results more consistent and more reflective of real world performance, and to avoid some of the issues they've had over the last few years with cars having to be relabeled after they've been on the market for a while. So, and what's happened with other cars, other manufacturers, when they've gone and redone their testing for 2017, is in most cases, they've seen anywhere from 1 to 3 mile per gallon drops in their label values, their fuel economy labels. And so the Prius has not gone through those new tests yet. So it'll probably drop a little bit from the 52 and 56 ratings it has right now. So that'll open up the gap even more for the Ioniq.
Well, so you're going to be able to drive this soon, so that's exciting. And overall, like, I'm reading the press release now, and of course it makes it sound fantastic because that's what press releases do. But overall, it looks like a really impressive alternative to the Prius. It looks a lot less weird if you're not looking to make that weird car statement that the Prius can stand for.
Right, but
it does.
It still stands out from the rest of the Hyundai lineup. When you look at any of the three variants, the hybrid, the plug-in hybrid, or the battery electric, it doesn't have the weird of the Prius, but it also still stands apart. So for those, there's a lot of customers that buy hybrids and battery electrics, that they want to make a statement. And so they're still going to have, when you see an Ioniq, once it's been on the road for a while and people know what it is, they'll know, hey, that's a really efficient vehicle. So you'll have something that's unique from the rest of the Hyundai lineup.
Yeah, I mean, it reminds me of a Saab. I'm looking at the side profile. It reminds me of a Saab 900.
And then if you want even less unique, than that. Kia is going to offer a car based on the same platform, all the same powertrains, but theirs is actually a crossover called the Niro. So they have the Niro, which it's an Ioniq but in a crossover body.
And actually, that one is a super smart move for them because crossovers are obviously hot and compact crossovers as well. Like I'm really interested to see what these cars do in the marketplace.
Me too.
I mean, especially the crossover, especially the Niro, because nobody's really offering that kind of thing other than Kia at this point.
I mean, there's some regular hybrid crossovers, like Toyota's got the RAV4 hybrid now, and there's a couple others out there, but there's nothing that's a plug-in hybrid or battery electric that's also in this price range, and that's the other thing. We'll probably hear the pricing is probably for the Ioniq, and I would guess maybe the Niro as well. It's going to be announced next week at the LA Auto Show.
Well, we'll keep an eye on that, and let's stay on the efficient car thing, but let's go to the completely other extreme. And now I want to temper this story because it came from Autocar, and there's not a ton of detail. And Autocar has this history of just kind of making stuff up, too.
In this case, I think they're probably right. And
all right.
The brand we're talking about here is Ferrari.
Right. So Sergio Marchionne has said that they want to increase production of Ferraris to 10,000 per year.
And I'm sure Pete DiLorenzo will be absolutely thrilled to hear that.
Yeah. It's for me like that. The initial thought is like, well, does that make the cars less special, or at least less rare? Yeah, probably. But I think it also makes Ferrari's profit better.
Yeah. Well, that's the only reason to raise the production volume that high.
Yeah, and the other thing they're going to do is that he hasn't really committed to it, but he said things look good to be all electric or all hybrid by 2025, something like that.
Actually 2019 or 2020. Yeah.
All right, so for me, and I know there's a lot of cars in that realm, or at least there's been some movement toward that kind of thing, or a hybrid. You've got the NSX. There was the Porsche,
the 918.
Yeah,
and the LaFerrari, of course.
Yeah, is that the type of Ferrari that excites you?
The LaFerrari?
Just a hybrid Ferrari. Does that really?
I think it depends on how they do it. If you incorporate some hybridization into the powertrain and do it in a way where it's fairly seamless and transparent and I think you can do it without changing the inherent character of a Ferrari. To basically do some energy recovery. You have some like they do on F1 cars. Have the kinetic energy recovery and probably maybe some heat energy recovery. There's things you can do to make it more efficient without really changing the base character. So you would, it would let you probably downsize the engine a little bit, but you're probably still going to have turbocharged V8s in there like you've got in the 488 today, and V12s. Definitely going to have V12s. In future Ferraris. You're just getting an extra boost of performance and efficiency at the same time from adding an electric motor in there.
All right, well, you're making me feel better about it, because I was just thinking, I really can't express how little interest I have in the idea of it at first, but then also I don't really have a whole lot of interest in Ferraris and supercars on their own. Beyond the oddballs, the old stuff and the GT Ferraris, the front engine Ferraris. Mm-hmm. But what does it turn Ferrari into when because they're for so long their engineering, especially their engines, have been one of their real calling cards. And when if they go all electric, which is they're going to go hybrid first.
Yeah, I can't see them going all electric anytime in the foreseeable future.
Yeah.
I think I guess, I could see them maybe doing one model that's all electric, but I can't see them taking the whole. I mean,
Right.
it would destroy talking about honest cars. An all electric Ferrari just doesn't seem like it would be a Ferrari.
Well,
that sound. It's just
right. But then think about it, because this is where I'm at. Like, no, it just changes the definition of what it means to be a Ferrari, and so that's it becomes more about the packaging than it does about the powertrain.
If you change the definition, then is it really a Ferrari?
Well, sure it is. I mean, I
really,
it's not well, yeah, it's not the classical definition of a Ferrari, but then again, like,
well, at that point it's something else. That doesn't make it bad. It's just not a Ferrari.
No, it's what modern. Look, I mean, you have an iPhone, right?
No, I have an Android.
Oh no, damn it! You have a MacBook Pro, right?
Not anymore. I'm working on a Windows machine now.
Damn it. Okay, so you have a Windows machine, right? How does that relate to the original PC? The 8086 powered IBM PC. It doesn't, right?
I mean, other than the fact that I've got a QWERTY keyboard here and a screen.
Right. So your interface is the same. Yeah, your electric Ferrari's going to have a steering wheel and a windshield.
Until it goes autonomous.
Yeah, I guess. Like, I do, like, to me, it's not what I'm interested in a Ferrari, but then again, it'll be this new thing that could be very interesting all on its own. Or it could just be a really expensive, pretty gadget. And, that's kind of what Ferraris are now. They certainly perform really well, but a lot of them get parked a lot. Yeah. They don't really get driven that much.
Well, I guess my feeling on it would be that, when we get to that point, maybe we need to just retire the Ferrari brand. Just let it go.
No, that has so much fashion cachet. Like, that's total fashion brand. Like,
I guess, as a purist, I would like to, my preference would be at that point, move on to something else, because I guess for me, a brand represents something, regardless of what kind of product it is. A brand it represents something tangible. And, to me, a Ferrari is something that looks amazing, goes really fast, and makes an incredible sound. It's a visceral experience to drive a car like that.
Yeah.
And, there's all these elements that come together to create that experience.
But now you're getting at what sort of my underlying impression of Ferrari. Like, yes, it does all those things, but the way it does it, the clever engineering that is under it. I mean, nobody engineers cars like Ferrari except for Ferrari. Like, they're just,
I don't know. Is it really all that clever? All that unique in its engineering from any number of other cars?
I mean maybe the gap has closed now, but
or an Audi R8, or I think, to me, it seems like there's more clever engineering, in a Acura NSX or Honda NSX than there is in a Ferrari.
Yeah. So again, like, maybe that gap has closed now, but in general, like, my broad strokes opinion of Ferrari has been that engineering has always been the way that they deliver, and they've always done it in a particular way, and whether they're burning, dead dinosaurs or they're transferring electrons, they're still going to do it a Ferrari way.
Okay, so what about when we get to autonomous? I mean, is that still? I mean, can you?
Oh no, then that's just it's a
Ferrari.
No, it's a handbag with wheels. Like, it's whatever.
Right.
I think we're all pretty clear on my stance. Huh?
So it's an Hermes car.
Yeah, exactly. And you know what? Like, that's fine. Hermes makes really beautiful things. I mean, Ferrari interiors are, often very finely crafted. Nobody's going to argue with that, but it like I said, it becomes a fashion brand at that point, because it's a fashion transport pod, and that's okay. Like, it's just not okay with me. But the brand discussion brings up another interesting point. Another
good
press
at
release.
Segway stuff.
Getting there. A press release landed in my inbox and probably yours over the last couple of weeks, announcing the impending revival of Cord. Now
there's a brand with some interesting engineering innovation.
Yeah, absolutely. So a couple of things. This is possible now more than it had been before. There were Cord revivals to a degree in the past, but right now the laws are such that cars need to be crash tested and emissions tested and all of those things. So there's it came out in 2015, the Low Volume Motor Vehicle Manufacturers Act. Makes it a bit easier for these types of revivals. And Cord, some people may not remember Cord.
And if you've ever been to a classic car show, especially a concours, you've almost certainly seen one.
Yeah. At a Concours, you've definitely they're there. The Cord, Auburn, and Duesenberg were, three big brands that were really iconic, and I think are all out of Indiana, right?
Yeah. In fact, at some point they were all owned by the Duesenberg brothers.
Right. So all three of those companies also expired before World War II. They were impressive for their time. Cords were beautifully styled, like Art Deco of their time. Just a gorgeous car. And they were impressively engineered. They were front-wheel drive. They had a big Lycoming 8-cylinder, I think, full of innovation, very powerful, very stylish. But
the first cars with hidden headlamps, like pop-up headlamps, and
here's where I have an issue with this sort of thing. Nobody who's very active in the hobby has any recollection of Cord in its prime. They've always been a thing on a shelf.
Mm-hmm.
And so is that where the gas Ferraris are going? is a thing on a shelf. And so I don't know. To me, I'm equating a Cord or a Duesenberg or an Auburn with it's very much like a classic wooden yacht, like something like an Elko or something from the same time. A younger person can appreciate it. You can pick up curation of it because essentially that car is the same as a famous work of art. You curate it while you own it, and then you pass it on. And they've been a collector car for so long that people who cherish them are fading away themselves. I don't know, Sam. I really don't think your son. Yeah, I don't think your son is going to have the same kind of appreciation of Cord. I'm sure it's neat, but I don't know that anybody is really going to pick up the mantle of these things.
Yeah, I guess I'm sure there's probably a handful of people out there that would want one that maybe they're rare enough today that they're hard to come by, hard to find, and to buy one. And I'm guessing that if they start building these again, they will be built using a lot of modern mechanicals under the skin, and so it'll look like a 1930s era Cord, like an 810 or an 812, but it's kind of a resto mod kind of thing, modern mechanical bits, modern brakes and engines, with classic styling,
and that's okay.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
If there's somebody willing to pay for it, I say go for it.
And you know what? Honestly, it's also probably cheaper than I did a quick look through Hemmings. A legit Cord is going to cost you $100,000 to a couple $100,000.
Oh yeah, at least. And some of the really good ones that you find at the concours are probably a lot more than that.
Yeah.
So
those have the prices where they say inquire.
Yeah. The interesting thing about that low volume manufacturing thing, excuse me. Yeah, that's very much, they have something very similar to that in the UK. They call it the single vehicle type approval. So basically you can build one-off cars or near one-off cars, and you can, with the low volume manufacturing rules, you don't have to go through crash testing and all the emissions certification and everything. You can, just build a limited number of vehicles and sell them. And that's what they do in the UK. So you find these really oddball cars in the UK. There's a lot of track cars. They're basically race cars that
Yeah.
the regulations for under the single vehicle type approval, basically if you put some headlights on it and windshield wiper and brake lights, you're pretty much good to go. And then I think if it's an open wheel car, you've got to put some fender skirts on,
like
some
cycle fenders.
Yeah, cycle fenders on it. So I don't know if you remember, about 2 or 3 years ago, Ford actually took a Formula Ford car. They were promoting their 1-liter EcoBoost 3-cylinder, and they took a Formula Ford car and put the 1-liter EcoBoost in there, and then put some LED lamps on it on the front and back and some cycle fenders on it, and basically made a road legal Formula Ford with this 3-cylinder turbo in it, just to promote this engine. And it was perfectly legal in the UK. And Lotus has offered some of these at various points, and some various models that were technically race cars, but they went through the single vehicle type approval process and sold a handful of them.
That sounds really cool.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the Cord itself is really neat. But it brings up a larger question to me too. In this one instance, yeah, probably it's going to make it easier to own a car that looks like that car that you've always thought you'd like to own. The problem is, like, because they're so rare and they're priceless, it's not going to be the same thing. It's not going to have that Lycoming engine. It's not going to have that front wheel drive pre-selector transmission. It's going to be, basically like just driving any modern car. So to me, that takes all the charm out of it.
Mm-hmm.
And all the real interest, because the way they operated and the difficulty, it really gives you an appreciation for what they did when they did it. And so yes, you get the style, you get the feel of it. If that's what you're interested in, that's cool. But this kind of thing comes up over and over again too. Like, there's always this cycle of like, hey, Packard's coming back, and you see these like horrible renderings, and you're like, oh man, upright tombstone shaped grills on swoopy bodies, and you're just like, that's just not right.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I think one of the rare exceptions, to some of that, is things like some of the Cobra replicas, or even some of the Porsche 356 replicas. Which, are typically much closer to the original, in terms of their character and the way they drive and the mechanicals than what you would get, for, some of these Packards or Accord. So I guess, it depends on how you do it, but I mean, it's obviously never going to be the real thing, but.
So, and it's weird too, like, so all the examples we just pointed out, like the Accord's a pre-war, the 356 is the 50s until 356 was built to 64?
Something like that.
Cobras, that's mid 60s. That's where all the heat is right now in the collector car market. And like, those are the cars that I've been seeing for the last 35 years. Car shows. Like, car shows, they continue to be sock hops, and that's very weird. Like, when does that shift? And if you really wanted to, like, this is not how I would bring back these brands. Like, the people who even remember even something like Packard, which or Studebaker, right? If you wanted to bring back Studebaker, besides the terrible Avantis that were built on like F bodies, the way I would do that is you have to make it relevant to more than just the people that remember it. And I see a lot of like getting distracted with picking up all these retro elements versus like understanding the ethos of what those companies are trying to do. Like, I would love to see somebody try to relaunch Packard. Packard made like the world class luxury automobile. Like, we say things are the Cadillac of things. Like, no. The Packard of things is much more like it. And if you understand the ethos and you forget the physical, then you can actually like relaunch that brand in a modern day. Like, the way Mercedes does Maybach is much closer to the way or even the way BMW does Rolls-Royce is the way you should relaunch these brands. And maybe I'm sort of thinking of it from a marketer's perspective, but versus making something that's like essentially a novelty. I don't know. Like if you're serious about it.
Yeah, I mean, you take the, you want to make it, going back to the beginning of this show, you want to make it something honest to what the brand represented in its heyday, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it has to be an exact copy of that. You want,
right.
If you're going to relaunch Cord, do some real engineering innovations, come up with something really original,
right.
And, maybe you incorporate a few design cues, but in a new original kind of way.
That solves the problem today.
I think like the Rolls-Royce is a good example there, or even Bentley, but and I'm not sure how you would really do that with a brand like Cord. Maybe you do it electric.
You'd have to do a lot of research, I think, about E.L. Cord, the man, and his motivations, and the organization, and really, again, understanding those motivations and seeing what were you trying to do, and how does that match up with what we're trying to do here. Or you can just completely co-opt it and make that premium retro story that everybody loves. I don't know. We're not going to solve this now, so we should just talk about something else. And so, peak auto industry. You shared a link with me from the drive. Toyota, Nissan both think that their U.S. car sales have peaked, and I tend to not disagree with that. I think that over the last couple of years, we've seen sales rates that are they're astronomically high, and I don't think they're going to stay that high for that much longer.
No, I agree. And I think my day job as an analyst with Navigant Research, one of the things we do is we forecast things like how the markets are going to go, how big markets for different vehicles and different technologies are going to go, and our forecast for light duty vehicle sales, for North America, we only project less than 1% growth rate over the next decade, annual growth rate over the next decade. Yeah. Even that might be optimistic. I think in the course of the next decade, we'll probably see a number of down years, and it'll probably bounce back up a bit. So overall, it'll probably average out to, flat to maybe just slightly growing over the course of the next decade. But yeah, I totally agree with what Toyota and Nissan are saying, that certainly if not the market as a whole, I think, the car sales, at least for the foreseeable future, have probably peaked, especially, given the way that, the market has changed.
When you say cars, you mean like sedans?
Passenger cars, yeah. So sedans and hatchbacks, as opposed to SUVs and crossovers and trucks. Because that's where the growth is right now.
But so it's a little crazy to me to hear them say like Nissan's like there's no more room for growth in America. But then again, it seems logical at a certain point. Like it can't continue to go up and up and up and up.
Yeah, well, I mean, you've got the fundamental problem of the way that we build cars today. Cars have gotten so much better than they were 25, 35, 45 years ago. The average age of cars on the road in the U.S. today is 11 and a half years. We've got 240 million cars on the road in this country right now. So
I know. I sit behind all of them in Boston traffic.
Yeah. How many more cars do we need? I mean, obviously there's a certain number of cars that get crashed and scrapped and just plain worn out every year. So I mean, there's going to be some inherent turnover, but eventually you're going to hit a peak. And especially if you look out into the 2020s and beyond, as we start in urban areas, shifting, as we talked about last time, moving towards mobility services and autonomous vehicles, with mobility services, there's going to be eventually a decline in vehicle sales. The degree of that decline is open to some debate, because it depends on how how many more, when you've got autonomous vehicles, a lot of, you enable mobility for a lot of people who can't drive today. So there's going to be actually some increased demand for vehicles. We're inclined to think that, the decline is not going to be as huge as some projections that say, sales are going to drop by 90%. I don't think it's going to be that big, but, eventually they are going to decline, and it's probably going to be in the order of, 20, 30, maybe 40%. But that's not going to be until the 2030s and beyond.
But that doesn't mean that there's not still a good business. Like,
oh no, absolutely.
There's, it's funny. Like, just because there's not growth, that just means that it's matured. At least at this point, the segment is matured, and you've got steady volume, and that's okay. You're always going to have X amount of sales. You structure your business to survive on that, that amount of the pie. And I think part of that is why automakers are rushing to find other things to be involved in.
Right. That's why they all want to, get into ride hailing and, actually providing those mobility services.
Yeah, I mean, and it makes perfect sense. I also think that, and maybe this is something you guys have looked at too, is like, it's probably going to trigger, once it really flattens out, we're going to see another wave of consolidation. Like, things are so tenuous now.
And that's the other thing, that, you mentioned that, it's still a good business. I mean, you're selling 16, 17, 18 million cars a year. That's a lot of revenue. It's a hell of a lot more revenue than most industries, on an annual basis. But if if the market is not growing significantly, we've got more and more players that want to get into this market. You got companies like Tesla that want to grow, and you've got startups like Faraday Future and Lucid Motors that want to get into this business, and Chinese companies that want to come in here. That means more people that want a piece of the pie that's not getting any bigger and will eventually shrink. That's going to put downward pressure on profitability.
Yeah, so my guess would be that you'd start to see some of with the influx of new lower cost players. You're going to see some of the historical smaller brands. It's really going to squeeze companies like Mazda. They're independent and they're small.
Mazda, and Mitsubishi, and some companies like Subaru, that have a nice solid niche, and they're content, to get some small but steady growth. They'll probably do okay, but some of these other, and even some of the bigger companies like Fiat Chrysler, are facing some serious problems going forward.
Fiat Chrysler, I worry about them. Yeah. I mean, I'm a big Mopar fan for a long time. I don't really get what's going on over there. Like, their product mix is weird. They're basically just kind of like, Jeep runs the business, and then on Ram.
They're focusing on the products that have the highest margins, and when you've got, everybody rushing away from cars into utilities and trucks, the cars have no margin. I get that. That's why they're focusing on Jeep and focusing on Ram.
Yeah, I understand that, but then, like, they have nothing else. I mean, that's a little bit of hyperbole, but the 300 is ancient at this point.
It's going to be around. I guess I saw a report probably till at least 2020.
It's a good car. It's just, I'm astounded, like, by how old that car is. It drives well still, but really, you think people are still gonna have an appetite for that car after so long? They've done an amazing job of keeping it fresh and relevant. So I mean, more power to them, but that seems like a very long time. On the market.
And they recognize the problems they've got. That's why Marchioni's been rushing around for the last 2 years trying to find somebody to partner with. That's why he was pushing so hard for GM to merge with him.
I don't know.
They've got problems that so far nobody else wants to take on.
So I mean, when you start to think about who's going to drop out when the competition tightens up and the volume drops, they're a big long-term established player. But I mean, you could once again see Chrysler just sort of being pieces of it being sold off, and the important scraps like Jeep sticking around with some other brand. Like, It's gonna be an interesting few years. So yeah, who knows?
We won't
I guess,
talk about the other interesting stuff tonight.
No, those. I will find my happy place.
Okay.
It's a big country. There's plenty of room for lots and lots of different opinions, and we'll certainly hear about them.
And we've got plenty of them.
Yes, exactly.
Between the two of us, we've got lots of opinions.
Yeah,
we're happy
absolutely.
to share them.
We'll just leave it at that. Anyway, we have killed another podcast.
Hey,
Episode 2. We've made it to 2. Huh?
I said I was just talking about cars.
Yeah, sure. So we didn't have any email feedback, but if you do have email feedback, it is
Wheelbearingscast@gmail.com.
I was flipping to the page. I have it written down in my notebook. Yes, Wheelbearingscast@gmail.
The show is now in the iTunes store.
Yep.
And also in Google Play Music. So if you use Google Play to listen to podcasts, it's in there. And within the next few days, probably it'll be on TuneIn Radio as well.
Yep.
And you can always take the basic feed and drop it into your podcast player of choice. All those links are on the site at wheelbearings.media. Just click on the subscribe to the podcast tab at the top, and you'll find all the links there. And please tell all your friends, and go into Google Play and iTunes and wherever else, and rate the show and give us reviews and give us some feedback.
I mean, we have had some feedback on Twitter, which I've abstained from the last couple of days, but I did see that somebody tweeted at you. You are at Sam Abelsamid, and I am at Boston_auto, so you can catch us there. So we're around, and we're looking for feedback. We'll fine tune the whole presentation, the website, and the RSS feeds and all that. But we wanted to get the podcast out, and so far I've been having a great time doing it. I hope that it's been well received, and we'll keep at it because it's fun.
And we'll talk to you again next week after the LA Auto Show. I'll be out in LA next week. So if you see me around the LA Convention Center, say hi, if you know what I look like. And
we'll put mugshots on the site.
You can. It's not that hard to figure out what I look like if you look around. Just Google. Google's your friend.
Yeah, I will take the tack of being an international man of mystery. Yeah.
Yeah, Dan.
So anyway,
leaves the greater Boston area.
Correct. I'm in my hovel. This I'm off the grid. No, I'm not. But anyway, I'll let you get to bed because you have the thing to go to with Borg Warner, so that'll be cool to talk about next week, and we'll catch everybody next time.
All right. Good night.
Owning a boat comes with a number of perks, like being able to say ahoy or land ho and not feel weird about it. So here's another perk. Geico's boat insurance offers access to the largest towing fleet on the water. And with specialist support from agents that are as passionate about boating as you are, there's so much value that you'll want to say, shiver me timbers, and not feel weird about that either. Get more with Geico.